Session number 1, we're calling Shielding SoCal Waters, Cyber Defense for Orange County's Water Infrastructure. Welcome to our panel discussion on shielding California waters. This is going to be a wonderful talk. And we're going to play you some person on the street interviews to let you know what people think about this particular issue.
So how often do you think about the cybersecurity of the infrastructure we rely on every day, like power grids and water systems? Never. Never.
I think for me, like a good amount, especially because in college right now, I'm possibly majoring in computer science and whatnot, and it, like in a way, does relate to that with like cybersecurity and whatnot.
I would say like never. I never really think about it.
Yeah, I honestly would never think about that, no.
All the time. We live near a dam, so I think about our water system constantly. And we're always getting hacked where I work at the hospital, so I think about it all the time.
I would say in the last couple weeks, more than I ever have. Is that a lot? It's not a ton of amount of mental capacity, but with the way that America is kind of going in our political place that we're at, yeah, I think that is becoming a bigger problem than maybe as it was 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Have you ever considered how a cyber attack could affect the critical services you use? What do you think could be the impact?
It could be devastating to everywhere, everybody.
All my passwords are the exact same, and I think that could damage me. If somebody found out my one password, probably wouldn't be good. Yeah, because my bank, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't actually announce that.
Gosh, I guess it would depend on the company that was attacked, based on like information. Information could be stolen just from people. If that's social security stuff, if that's banking stuff, if that's, I don't know, any information that's on the internet that they hack, that could be pretty detrimental to that individual. So it'd be pretty bad.
All right. Well, ignorance is bliss, folks. So we're here to explore the unique vulnerabilities and strengths in safeguarding our water infrastructure against cyber threats. Joining us today are some esteemed experts in the field. Ivana Brooks, Cyber Intelligence Analyst, Orange County Intelligence Assessment Center, Law Enforcement Perspective on Cyber Threats. She's such an expert with a focus on prevention and rapid response strategies. Hello, with Orange County. Boy, did I eat up all of her thing? Was that her signal to get off? What was that? Okay. We also have Troy Laughlin, CEO of Enterprise Security, Inc., a national full-service security system firm headquartered here in Orange County. And joining us live via the miracle of Zoom is from Sacramento, Ted Johnson, Analyst in the Critical Infrastructure Protection Section, CIP, of Homeland Security Division in the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Let's dive right in, folks. First of all, Ivana, let me ask you, from a law enforcement perspective,
yes, what
are the most significant cyber threats facing Orange County's water infrastructure?
Well, how many of you in here have a little bit of a background in cybersecurity or in cyber? Okay, so I'm just trying to get a feel of what to give you. So BECs are probably our most prominent right now. BEC stands for Business Email Compromise. And how that occurs, and that can just be in any business, okay? But we've seen it here in Orange County a couple of times. So how that operates is, let's say a CTA, cyber threat actor, will reach out via email typically, and they will pose as maybe a vendor that you utilize already, that you usually make a payment to, et cetera. So you do business with them on a monthly basis, let's say. And they will ask for typically a different form of payment. And someone in the financial department might get an email like this and unknowingly change it to ACH or however they're asking for. Now, if they're asking for cryptocurrency, that's going to be a big red flag, guys, okay? So just throwing that out there. I know we're at all levels here. So, but yeah, sometimes they might ask for a different form of payment that might seem legit, okay? And it might even look like that it is from the email is actually from the actual vendor. Now, they might do typo squatting, is what it's called, is when you might have a domain or an email address that looks just like the email address, but it might be off by something that you might overlook, like a 1 might be an L and vice versa, right? However, that's not always the case either. Now they're getting better, and especially with AI and network intrusion, because the other guys, let's say the vendor, let's say they're the one that's compromised, and they're having emails coming out of their own outbox and being sent to you guys. So it's gonna look like it's legit coming from them. So maybe your filters and things like that might not catch it. So that's why we have to be vigilant and looking and making sure that this different form of payment or whatever they're asking for is something that's for real. So contact them and see, is this what you're really asking for, or it might be a CTA, a cyber threat actor. So this has happened a couple times, and the result of that was it wasn't noticed until a few months later. So by then, all these payments had gone out, and they were unknowing that they were paying the bad actor. And the actual vendor reached out and they asked, where's our money? We haven't been paid in a few months. And that's where the conflict was, well, we've been paying you. No, you haven't. So that's when, okay, now we got to go and look back and find out where we went wrong, where it was going. And if it is in cryptocurrency, I don't want anyone to think that if crypto means it's gone forever, especially if it's in Bitcoin. Crypto, you can actually trace it, and that was the point of crypto, is it's on a publicized ledger. Yeah, it's digital, it's a little bit different. But if they ask for something else, like in Monero, there's tons of different kinds of cryptocurrency. Monero doesn't have a public ledger. It doesn't have a blockchain that you can see. So essentially, it doesn't have a blockchain, so you can't follow it. That's just a quick overview of crypto. But anyways, BEC is the big hitter right now, but phishing is always going to be happening. So just remain vigilant on those types of things and just double check when you're getting requests. And we had a critical infrastructure a couple days ago that was getting a vishing. So vishing is the same as phishing, but it's voice. It's a phone call. And then there's smishing as well, which is SMS, so that's text. I think we've all gotten some of those. You have a UPS package you need to pick up, yada, yada. No, I don't. I know when my packages are coming because I know what I ordered and I can't wait. But yeah, things like that, and we fall victim to them. We'll respond, and then you start a conversation, et cetera. So it's just confirming that, these things that are coming to you that are going to seem real, that they actually are. So don't be shy about reaching out, especially if it's to a vendor or somebody that you guys actually know, and confirming these things. That was a very long answer.
That's all right. It was interesting.
Okay.
Troy, your specialty is critical government infrastructure. Looking at Orange County, what are our challenges here?
Thank you, Fritz. In Orange County is the bastion, if you will, for population density, economic hub, affluent individuals, and the critical infrastructure for the water is remote in most cases where we work. So we have the dubious challenge of securing something that is highly disconnected, if you will, from everything else. And in a lot of these security systems, we typically lag at least 10 years behind technology. So what you see today is about 10 years behind. We have our customers literally within the last 2 to 3 years just now joining the virtualization bandwagon, if you will, the trend. And We do that because it's security, and we like to be siloed, and we are responsible, and we like to keep everything in security secure. But when you start integrating and converging other groups of people, like cybersecurity, it becomes a real challenge, because now you have a bunch of people in the room, and what used to be just a security department responsible literally for who goes where when is now a group of people that requires positive confirmation. It requires access and request. It requires auditing. It requires everything so that you know where that person is going. They are allowed to go there. And like I said, security is about 10 years behind in that realm. So it's going to take quite the movement in this industry to get cyber converged with where security is. So
here's a follow-up question.
yes, sir.
So is it possible for a layman, a civilian, to hack into a public water district? I mean, people worry about that, you know, with not only water, but all of our infrastructure stuff, electricity too. I mean, is it even possible for somebody to do that?
I would definitely say yes, absolutely possible. And you know, that hacking, it's one thing to think of hacking like from the outside, which is a great perspective, but a lot of these events that happen are from the inside. And when you break down the process and how it works, yes, you know, in a controlled environment, cyber keeps a lot of people out of the room, so to speak. But then you get to the security system, and it's a big vulnerability. So anybody that has access to that computer is really what you need to be worried about, because those are the people that can do the most damage if their card is stolen, if their card is duplicated. A lot of security technology cards to this day, you can literally drop it in something at the supermarket and have a copy the next day. It's quite simply that easy to do it because of the aging infrastructures and what it takes to upgrade our systems. We're not a fast, you know, adapting industry by any stretch.
Yeah, we hear all these nightmare scenarios about the electrical grid and how people have already attempted to do that. I just wondered if it's as easy with the water system as well. Come in, Ted. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, how are you? Welcome. It's nice to see you. You know, we're in California, we're the 5th largest economy in the world, so we have a special sensitivity to anybody that could interrupt our water system here. How do you feel we're doing as a state? Are we giving enough resource to that and enough concentration to that as an issue?
Appreciate the question, and good morning. Sorry I can't be there in person. Our team looks forward in the future to coming down to the OC Water Summits. But as far as resources, yeah, it is putting considerable resources against any of those challenges, and we take them very seriously. Anyone in the room who's been tracking closely some of the activities that the federal government may have recently heard about the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and National Security Advisor sending a letter to all U.S. governors about the urgent need to safeguard the water sector, critical infrastructure, especially against cyber threats. Now, I may add a caveat in here that I'm more of a physical security professional rather than a cyber one. But in recent years, probably going back 5 to 10 years, there's been a conscious effort to bring those two spheres together, meaning that all cyber threats have a physical component and vice versa. Going back to the letter that came down, it was making owners and operators and also governments throughout the states, California obviously being one of the largest ones, equal to many economies around the world, and it was used in order to look at priority gaps and emphasize the need for states and water systems to take immediate action in securing the infrastructure against cyber attacks. California obviously was a participant in that, and it's just one example how California and the United States is looking at our water infrastructure. Whether it's physical or cyber, we need to be vigilant to protect our assets in the water sector. So drilling down to what my team does, our main way of focusing on the threats that might be out there and putting resources against them is through information sharing and threat reporting to both the public and private sectors. A few ways we accomplish this is sharing partner agency products. So Department of Homeland Security has several agencies, Intelligence Analysis and also CISA, so their cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency, and they produce regular products that we share throughout the state of California. We also work with the Water ISAC, which many of you are probably familiar with, or FBI InfraGard, which is more of a localized effort in order to share information about the threats and vulnerabilities that may be out there, whether it's physical or cyber. In addition to that, my shop, the Critical Infrastructure Protection Team within the State Threat Assessment Center, I know there's a lot of acronyms associated with it, but the STAC SIP team that I'm a part of does its own threat analysis, but with a physical bent to it. If you give me just a few minutes of your time, I can kind of go over our latest one and how we define the physical security landscape specifically for the water sector. So currently, common criminals are the most likely and persistent assailants to target the water infrastructure. Some of you may be aware of that happening at your own facilities. However, there's aspirational goals for violent extremists to constitute a potential and lethal threat against the critical infrastructure. Electrical was mentioned before, that's one of the ones in other lifeline sectors. Violent extremists are most likely to target water and wastewater systems and domestic individuals espoused to accelerationist goals, which meaning they're trying to bring around an end times. We've found that there's not one ideology that is targeting critical infrastructure, but multiple ideologies. However, there is the accelerationist bent up to a lot of them. And ultimately, assailants are motivated by a range of political and ideological beliefs. I know we touched on that a little bit earlier about contentious political attitudes that might be prevalent in the United States. And kind of the threats we're seeing across the board when it comes to water infrastructure and critical infrastructure that are lifelines is UASs, so unmanned aerial systems, drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, you may have heard called several things, is of concern. Disinformation and misinformation, domestic violent extremists and foreign terrorist organizations, and common criminals, as I mentioned before, nation-state adversaries. Many of you may be aware of the UASs that are out there, cheap and readily available. You go down to Costco and buy one right off the shelf, and if you've been in tune with what's going on in possibly Syria or Iraq or even Ukraine, concern obviously being that some of those practices as using them as weapons of war may be coming home at a certain point. It's just so easy to acquire that sort of technology. Violent extremists and criminals, nation-state adversaries may be trying to conduct surveillance, pre-operational planning in order to execute attacks. So something to keep in mind. Another item we've looked at, which you may think doesn't quite fit the modality of threats, is disinformation and misinformation. But we found that is also something that utilities should be concerned with. Recently, a utility reported misinformation spread throughout their community about the ability to not provide water, caused customers to fill bathtubs and other containers, and kind of had a capacity stressing incident for the treatment plant itself. And this mis and disinformation is something that should be considered. I know another concern that's out there is biological or chemical adulterants that might be used in the water system. And while that's difficult to perpetrate just because you need such a large volume and dilution is a solution, something that should be considered is that dis or misinformation that follows on in public fear of drinking the water supply. And another item, and I know there was a distinct bent in some of the questions we may have that covers terrorists, but what we're looking at is not necessarily foreign terrorists, but domestic violence extremists that could be a challenge going forward. They've been quite active in the last several years, and as I was mentioning before, not one particular ideology, but the accelerationist theory is behind a lot of their activities. Recently, there was someone who inspired in the Michigan area, and they encountered armed groups of people harassing utility employees and questioning them with conspiratorial narratives. There's also a lot of online rhetoric that's out there as well. If you haven't heard of it, sitting ducks, worthy prey is kind of one of the taglines that you see on the internet, talking specifically about critical infrastructure. And there's also a document out there entitled The Known Vulnerabilities of the United States of America, which covers instructions for attacking critical infrastructure, whether it's transportation, water, or energy. So items are definitely of concern there, and specifically for the water sector, fentanyl has been tagged as something that could be used as an adulterant. Once again, though, I think in a lot of cases, you would find that it's really the mis and disinformation that would be the bigger challenge that would have to counter. And then foreign terrorist organizations, I think at this point, post the global war on terrorism, we've seen that their ability to reach out globally is not quite there. However, they aspire to make attacks on our homeland. And in 2018, recently, the Islamic State encouraged online supporters to poison local water reservoirs in Wisconsin. So definitely people being radicalized at home here is a challenge. And then the most common one that we've cited is common criminals. So physical security incidents, whether it's criminal break-ins at utilities for financial gain or assailants that can not only affect your water sector elements, but if you have a facility that has multiple critical infrastructures, for example, electricity or communications capabilities, those are definitely targets as well. However, with that all being said, that was a recent kind of assessment we had done for the water sector specifically, based off suspicious activity reports, which are collected from around the state. The most common incidents we're seeing is suspicious activities, which necessarily aren't legal, like photography and surveillance, and then unauthorized access, which a lot of times is trespass, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, and then also theft and diversion. So that's kind of the gamut of potential threats you might see out there. But again, to specifically answer your question, the way we mitigate threats through the State Threat Assessment Center is through information sharing and through the public and private sector. So these sort of engagements, but then also the products we push out to our partners throughout the state. And I would invite anyone to do a little bit more research. You can find our information online, and we're happy to share products and also make appearances in order to get the word out on what we're seeing as far as the threat, and then also common vulnerabilities and consequences.
Thank you so much. Ivana, that's your expertise. I mean, you study drafting on his criminal aspect of this. Where do most of these threats come from? Are they foreign, or are they domestic, or both, or which are you most concerned about?
It's both. I mean, for critical infrastructure impacts and attacks, it's typically going to be our adversaries like Russia, Iran, China, et cetera. So those are called APT groups, Advanced Persistent Threat Groups. And so those cyber threat actors, hackers that are nation state sponsored like that, they got a lot of money to back them up. So that means they have a lot of resources, a lot of tools, and the best of the best because they're getting paid, right? So they're going to be reaching out and trying to attack the critical infrastructures. Now, that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes it can be hacktivists, and hacktivists are activists that are hackers, right? And they typically will try to cause disruption. It's not always going to be, let's say, like we think like a ransomware attack. That's not always going to be the case. It can just be simply to cause disruption or doing so because of their ideologies. Unitronics was an equipment that was impacted. We saw it here in Orange County, but it occurred in Pennsylvania at the end of last year at a water sector. And Unitronics is an Israeli-made equipment, and it's to manage and control specific devices, right? So the reason, and that was by Cyber Avengers, and they are an Iranian hacking group. And the reason why they were doing this is just because of where the equipment was manufactured from. So it's because of specific ideologies. So, it's not always what everybody thinks the intent is, always out for money or, just to cause disruption because they can. It's, sometimes just about ideologies and what they believe in. And some are just hackers playing around. And sometimes they'll do a little bit of something, but it doesn't really cause any damage, really. You're still operational. It might be a glitch or something like that, and you're like, what was that? It could be they were just messing around and just testing out your network just to see what you got going on, how far they can go. And that's why it's really good to, stay up to speed with everything, have your software updates up to date. I always say as an example, when you get like a little notification on your iPhone or something like that says software update, and you're like, oh man, I don't want to do that right now. I mean, most of us like to do it for the new emojis, but whatever. But they're sending this notification out for a reason. That means there's a hole, there's a vulnerability, there's a patch that needs to be fixed. So same thing goes with all of your equipment and to reduce network intrusion and to stay up to date on those and like your firmware and things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Troy, is there anything we can feel positive about? I mean, are we making advances in trying to ward off this problem?
Oh, absolutely. The convergence between, security and various industries since I've been in the industry in 2000 it's been remarkable. We are slow, but we do get there. And as far as cyber goes, those are now the people with the budgets, and usually the people with the budgets determine a lot of what is done. So I think we're making great strides. I just think as an industry, how security has been perceived and how we operate has been very much siloed, mostly because we're security, and we've taken 100% responsibility, for the entire security systems that we're responsible to manage. And now we have rooms of 10, 15 people to do what one or two of us used to do. And it's just getting that new awareness and getting the right people in the rooms, for sure.
Awesome. Ted, what about the cooperation between federal regulation and state regulation? Describe how that works.
Federal and state regulation, I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to that. I can tell you that what we've seen over the years is people reaching out and industry reaching out to us in order to go over what they're looking at as far as their own internal threat assessments. I know a lot of the utilities, whether it's water or electricity, conduct their own risk assessments, the components of that being threat, threat, vulnerability, and consequence. And we typically handle the threat. So in a lot of instances, there will be a third party kind of vetting that threat. But if I can just dovetail with my first question a bit and just go back on a little bit of a history lesson. So post 9/11, the 9/11 Commission report covered some items that were of specific interest to avoid another 9/11 in our country. And the big piece of that was information sharing. So when it comes to a lot of regulations that are out there, whether it's the electricity sector and SIP 14 or other physical security measures that are out there that are good practices, such as the WISE standards that are found in the water industry, those are items that we need to share across the board and make sure that everyone from the largest entities to the smallest entities are understanding them. Because of that, the California State Threat Assessment System was stood up approximately 2013, and it is a information sharing network across California designed to protect society through information sharing and communication. The staff help safeguard communities in California by having a dynamic security nexus, and we have 4 major urban and area fusion centers. The one I work for is the State Fusion Center located in Sacramento, but we have fusion centers in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego. I know you have a representative from the OCAIC on stage. Great to hear from them. And we all have different perspectives. The fusion centers look at their regional areas, and for the state, we kind of look at the state perspective, so a more strategic perspective, but we all work together as one group. When it comes specifically to regulatory items, we kind of stay out of that lane. What we are designed to do is specifically information share. And we bring together federal and state and tribal entities from law enforcement and private sector in order to work together. And that can be at the federal level, to include DHS and the FBI. We have them regular meetings with them, and in fact, DHS sits in our office at the state level. And we have partnerships with other state agencies like CHP, CDCR, so Department of Corrections, the DMV and Department of Justice, and CPUC and other regulators as well. And we're kind of a third-party vetting when it comes to that. So we don't enter into the regulatory lane at all. What we do is provide information and kind of a third-party vetting, especially when it comes to what my team does, which is analysis of a threat, but then also physical security assessments, so on-site assessments. Other federal counterparts that we work with. Oh, sorry, did you have something?
No, I misread the conclusion of your sentence there.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. Other counterparts we have are the potential security advisors that work for DHS. We may even have some in the audience. I would encourage you to get to know them. They're very similar to what our infrastructure protection team does, and cybersecurity advisors. So we have this nexus called the STAS, that is a network of information sharing across the state. And in particular, the agency I work for, Cal OES, houses the State Threat Assessment Center, so the STAC, another fun acronym, which falls under our Homeland Security Division. And it has two branches within the Homeland Security Division, our State Threat Assessment Center, but also the CalSIC, which some of my colleagues on stage probably have some understanding of. That is our Cyber Integration and Security Center for the state, and they really handle that cyber component. Our side, the STAC, handles more of the intelligence and physical security, and is comprised of three teams. Our Tactical Intelligence Unit and Strategic Teams are two of the teams, and they are center hubs for information sharing and also intelligence sharing. So to my first question, that kind of points back at where we get some of our threat components. And then my team layers in the infrastructure portion by identifying, prioritizing, and protecting critical infrastructure. The protecting piece really being the educational piece, but then also on-site assessments as well. And the STAC closely works with federal partners, as I was saying before. We provide this information that we collect at our level, and we also do analysis, and we push that out on unclassified distribution lists, but also FOUO or law enforcement sensitive distribution lists to inform our law enforcement partners about what might be going on in any particular sector within the state. I would encourage you to reach out to our team to get on some of those distro lists. But yeah, there is a large apparatus within the state that does regular information sharing. And my particular section looks at specifically critical infrastructure and water sector.
Okay.
In fact, we have an assessment coming up in a water treatment plant in the next week or so. So we're open to those sort of engagements, and it's actually one of our pillars when it comes to our Homeland Security strategy outreach to public and private sector.
Awesome. Let us know how the assessment goes. Hey, Ivana, you know, you think about it, a fully functioning water system anywhere in the United States poses a national security threat if it's not working.
Correct.
So how do you work with the local water districts to educate them on how to react to a cyber attack?
Yeah. So I'm at the Orange County Intelligence Assessment Center, also known as OCIAC. And what we are is a fusion center, and Ted touched on that a little bit. So how many of you guys have heard of a fusion center? That's what I was expecting. So after 9/11, like Ted was talking, it was commissioned that, the Department of Homeland Security was born to protect our borders so that something like 9/11 wouldn't happen again. And underneath DHS is us, fusion centers. So our role is to share information between our federal, local, and state partners, because that was part of the issue with 9/11. There was information that federal had and local had, and it wasn't shared. And it might have prevented some things that occurred. So with that, there's about 80 fusion centers in the United States. Every state has at least one, and in California we have 6. So we're the one responsible for Orange County, and we are kind of unique in the way that we are the only fusion center in the United States that is responsible for one county. And that makes us big time, right? Because it's the amount of opportunity for crime that can happen here. It's the 42-mile coastline that we're responsible for. There's a lot of money that we know that flows through Orange County, so there's a lot of opportunity for crime. So we are embedded with the Orange County Sheriff's Department. So thank you for the guards that came and did the nice ceremony today. But we're embedded with them, and so we're part of the National Fusion Center Association, NFCA. So we communicate with all the other fusion centers, and we share information on, it could be RFIs, which are requests for information, or we're just giving information of like, hey, we're seeing this here, are you guys seeing this over there? Or is anybody else seeing this happening over there? Or just sharing information through products or just notifications like that. So that's how we are getting this information. That's one aspect. I'm also a task force analyst with the FBI, so I'm with the Orange County Cyber Task Force. So one hat, I'm at OCIAC, and I share information on threats, et cetera, and give briefings like to the water sector, private as well, and law enforcement. I give a lot of briefings, a lot of outreach. We do tabletop exercises because we say don't be afraid of a cyber attack, count on it, and then you'll be a little bit more prepared. Now, nothing's going to be 100%, but you can do your best, right? And so when you know what hits the fan, you kind of have a protocol and you know who you're going to call, how you're going to work around this, and how to remain operational with the least amount of downtime. So with the feds part, I'm over there, and I do more case support with the investigations. So those APT groups that I was talking about, definitely not looking into them, definitely are. So I do case support with that. So that takes a very long time. You know, some people ask, like, well, are these hackers and big cyber groups, are they ever caught? Yeah, they are. And a lot of them you've probably seen in the news from our branch, the LA field office, which is pretty cool. But the problem with that is just because you stop one group doesn't mean that their code that they're using for the malware, et cetera, isn't still out there or manipulated, modified, and released. And all these groups, once you catch one group, doesn't mean you caught everybody because they all morph and go into different groups, like the Colonial Pipeline, right? DarkSide attacked them, and they used to be Conti. And so, you know, just because they're one group doesn't mean they're another, so it makes it very difficult. I actually forgot what the question was at this point. I just kind of went off on a tangent and was having fun. Hope you guys are learning something.
What makes that job that you're talking about even more difficult is the computer technology and software and hardware accelerates forward. So you have to not only catch them with their current malware, but try to anticipate what they're going to make more sophisticated next week.
Right. Oh. And yeah, so we get with our connections with the federal side, local, state, et cetera, and the National Fusion Center Association, we get a lot of we have a lot of resources, and we get tripwire notifications. So that's how we're able to notify our critical infrastructures and the water side. And I have a great relationship with Vicki Osborne, the director of the emergency operations, and that's part of it is having good relationships with your federal and local partners to assist in those little secrets maybe that you wouldn't get normally, right?
Troy, and also the relationship between private and public sector. There has to be cooperation on both sides in order to make the system work. Tell me how we're making strides along that.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to the private side of the house, a great analogy with what everyone is saying here is, again, internal security groups have been shielded. They've been siloed for reasons. And typically, the information that is within is not shared, especially across organizations. People don't want their dirty laundry out there. So we deal with customers every single day that do have events. And what we try to stress in these environments is a locally responsible group and joint, we'll call it a task force for this discussion, of people that know everything about that system, that can respond and help, upline to the public. Because, again, in the security industry, a lot of events go, first of all, unpublished, undocumented to the public, because you don't want that information out there. But you need to respond to the threat and what is happening in such a way that you can help the public sector with these issues. So it's a very fine line that we walk every single day, with our customers on how to share that information in the best, most efficient way without compromising the security system, in the background. We can't just put it out there like what happened. We have to filter that through certain channels and make sure that we have people available to do that and talk to the upline federal agencies if necessary. So,
awesome. Well, we want to save time for questions from the audience. And does anybody out there have a cyber question? Yes, sir. Here's one in the front row.
I don't know whether it's a cyber question or not, but when we're trying to resolve issues with computers and we need help, and we can't immediately go to you. If I had an accounting problem, I'd find somebody who had CPA behind their name. Is there somebody out there that has cybersecurity initials or things like that?
His question was, if he has a cybersecurity issue or just a computer issue in general, and you want to protect your officer, who do you go to? Do you recommend anything? Is there like a hotline number for cyber stuff?
Well, I mean, for each office, venue, what have you, you're going to want an IT team. Because like I said, when you know what hits the fan, who you're going to call, you need someone that's going to be able to know what is the most necessary thing to do in the least amount of time, right? Because if you're just plugging things left and right, that sometimes can hurt you. You have to have proper backups and know what those are and be able to check the logs. So there's a lot more to it. So it's good to have, yes, some kind of IT team or resource that you can reach out to. There's a lot. I mean, there's some that are automated. There's a big one that, everybody kind of heard about recently, so.
Push for if your company's
job
growing up.
opening,
Yeah.
But there are some good ones. I can't, unfortunately, make recommendations because of where I work. But yes, they are out there. There's a lot of small businesses, small companies that will help if you have a smaller office or business that will help you with your IT and your network structure. And bottom line, if you learn anything, switch your passwords every 90 days, use passphrases. Multi-factor authentication does help, and that's specifically what did happen with Colonial Pipeline. So think, oh, we don't need that. Yeah, you do.
Ted, we're going to ask you one more question because we don't want you to be late for your assessment.
Quick though, I could jump in on that last one. I would encourage anyone, and it's not for IT support, but definitely if there is some sort of cyber incident, there is within Cal OES and the Homeland Security Division, the California Cybersecurity Integration Center, and they do respond to those sort of incidents. Obviously, they're limited in resources, and in a lot of instances, depending on the locality you're at, they defer to the Fusion Center. Some of the Fusion Centers have cybersecurity capabilities as well, but they do respond. They do have a lab there that looks at malware. But I would encourage you to start a relationship with them, no matter the size of your entity, and they do active outreach. What's interesting is there's also the California Cybersecurity Task Force that they're charged with setting up, and it's kind of been an entity that has been at steady state for a number of years with not a lot of membership, but recently with an executive order from the governor, we've been charged with looking at the various sectors and how artificial intelligence affects it, generative AI, and in those efforts, we've been doing concerted outreach to public and private sector, not only on the CalSec side, but on the physical security side as well. So I'd encourage you to form that relationship. There's working groups underneath the task force that you could join, but there's also resources there that at least could advise you. Incident response may be a little bit tricky just based off resources, but I would encourage you to form that relationship. And it's, once again, you can look it up online, you could be part of their distro, but it's the California Cybersecurity Integration Center under Cal OES. And sorry, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you. No problem. Any other questions?
I got a question.
Yes. Where are you?
Where are you?
Okay.
First of all, Mark Monan, El Toro Water District. I'd like to thank MODOC and OCWD for putting this on. I look forward to this every year. I do have a question, but I wanted to say something beforehand. You did a beautiful pledge and anthem. Would you also please keep the Orange County firefighters that were involved in a horrific crash on 241 coming back from the airport fire in your thoughts and prayers? One of our districts, Trabuco, I think, was also affected by the fire. So we were thinking of them. My question is, I learned recently that the IRS, some people would file for a refund, and it would be sent to them, not for the person desired, but it'd be like somebody hacked me and asked for a refund, and then they got it, cashed a check. And if these culprits can be that creative, are there things that are happening to our water world that are pretty creative? Any themes that these hackers are doing in the water world? Thank you.
Who'd like to speak on behalf of the IRS here? Troy's out. Ivana's out.
Yeah.
Ed, you're up. You're close to the seat of government. No? I think they can do anything that requires computer operation is vulnerable. We can say that, right? Any other? I saw a gentleman back here. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering about prosecution. How often do you actually are you able to come down to an arrest and or even identifying but making the arrest and prosecution? What type of penalties are there?
That's a great question, Ivana.
For like the hackers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at the task force, for what I can say, we apprehend a lot, and it depends on where we are in the investigation, where they're actually from there with the warrant taken behind bars. I'm not a special agent, I'm an analyst. I do go on a few of the warrants because I assist with the workup on the targets, if you will. But further from that, I am no longer part of the investigation. I don't go to the court or anything like that. But as far as long as I've been on with my experience, actually put behind bars more than you think, actually. And a lot of it is coming from LAFO, LA Field Office.
For how long do they get sent, do you know?
Some are for about 20 years. Yeah.
Would you give our guests a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? Troy and Ivana and Ted. Thank you, Ted.